Okay, we're good to go for another episode of MysteryMan2K6 talk show. And I'm jumping the gun a little bit because I don't feel like following continuity. You know, it's not quite the 18th, but who the heck cares? I just feel like talking, biblically, and the Bible doesn't really follow continuity. And, some places, it's crazy. So I'm going to talk about crazy biblical figures, biblical creatures, strange things. And here we go. Now, one of the strangest things that's not really explained in the Bible very well is a creature called Behemoth. Now, Behemoth is actually, to make this pretty clear, it's basically the biggest dinosaur that ever lived. And Behemoth was the Brachiosaurus. Behemoth was 500 meters. Behemoth was a good scale, I would say, is oddly enough Serpentera on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2, which was Lord Zed's traveling vehicle. When they show the scale of Serpentera destroying the lost city, the deserted city, I should say, Behemoth is on that scale. And why was there a great flood? Well, there was a great flood because there were creatures like Behemoth still around. Behemoth was too freaking big to be honest, and the dang thing just couldn't be destroyed. There was about, after the destruction of the dinosaurs, Behemoth just, it was graceful, but it was hard to destroy. So in about 975,000 BC, Behemoth was still around. I mean, just some of these creatures just could not be destroyed. They just couldn't, It couldn't take 7 disasters to knock this creature off the planet, So I kind of was thinking about this because I was watching YouTube and hearing about these 10 disasters, storms that were going on in 10 states, and it's like, I don't know, is Jesus trying to eliminate a lot of the United States and civilization? Are we like Behemoth? Are we hard to get rid of? I don't know. I can give you some clues. I can give you some heads up. I can give you some warnings. I can give what I can give, So, what I can give is just advice and a historical recollection of what I can tap into, which is basically a source of information that's there for some reason. And what's going on here is there's a confliction of spirits. Now, there's 4 spirits that are the strongest spirits, period. There's the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, the Ghost of Darkness, and the Power of Darkness. Now, let me clarify a little bit of what happened with Behemoth. Now, with Behemoth, it took all 4 of those forces to unite. which basically means that it took everything to get that freaking thing off the planet. You know, it took all of the devil's power, all of God's power, all of the wielding of nature to wipe out Behemoth. And so what's going on here is it's kind of what you might say reaching a point of a rope being stretched in two directions. Like, civilization one end wants to survive, and one end wants the end. And there's a big tar pit, you might say, in the middle. The big tar pit, you might say, would be humanity sinking into nothingness, following the dinosaurs. You know, so basically, the devil's tired. Jesus is tired. The spirits are tired. You have to understand that these beings, these spirits, they're old. They go dormant, they sleep, but they're tired of dealing with this stuff. So it's like a dinosaur deal with humanity. You know, it's like some people want to live. The people who have the Holy Spirit or whatever want to live. The people who have a spirit of darkness or self-defeat, they kind of just want to get it over with, you know, because they figure, well, they're already facing reckoning and defeat, so why not just give up? Well, that's the spirit of defeat. That means you've already given up. It doesn't have to be that way necessarily. What did it take to wipe out Behemoth? Well, it took everything. It took the Great Flood, and here's a more accurate to the T of what it took. After 6 devastating forces of nature that it took to wipe out the dinosaurs, which did exist, they existed for about 75 million years, and it sounds funny and oddly ridiculous, but they're not referenced in the Bible. Only the Behemoth was, because it was the biggest. Yes, it's very funny, I know. But humanity is the new dinosaur. And these spirits are like, can't we get these fuckers off the planet? And they're like, we just like, how do we do it? How do we do a Behemoth on humanity? You know, and it's like, how do we rid ourselves of this annoyance, you know? Because humanity, in a way, it's always in a mode of self-destruct. And it, you know, from the day you're born to the day you die, you are in sort of a timing mechanism self-destruct sequence, and it's just your genetic biological clock. But you know, it doesn't have to 100% be that way. So why are you laughing? Okay, well, I don't have a sealed off studio, so I have some distractions here. Anyway, I'm trying to tell you exactly what happened. So Satan fell from the pit, and he was fucking pissed off. And what's left over in there is, he's split, but he's stuck in one place, and that is La Fusiorana Masakana, which in Hebrew means devoid of hopelessness. And it really is. So when he fell, it wasn't so much that he left the game, you know, because he was still needed, because humanity was going to be such a failure. Humanity was going to be a big dinosaur, in effect. So he's needed. He will always be needed. And he can take his naps now and then. And he can do whatever he wants, basically. As for if you want to know the advantages of the angels versus the demons, they're the same things. Just the angels are stronger and slower, and the demons are faster. They're fast builders. They're fast workers. They do things quickly. They can get things done. So it's not so much as a... I mean, what would you really want to hear? Would you want to hear what it took? The Great Flood took the entire atmosphere, which was the exosphere, the stratosphere, the tetrasphere, the metrosphere, the exosphere, the tetrasphere, the metrosphere. There's 7 of them, okay? It took the entire everything, essence of life to wipe out that last bit of life. The Great Flood was the final thing to wipe out something that just could not be done. It could not be done. So as for Noah, well, Noah did not happen in a sense. Noah was something that was added later to make the story a little bit more tangible. I mean, Noah was just an Israelite that led some, people in some directions, this and that. But as for having every single animal and everything on one boat, Noah didn't happen. And it rhymes that way for a reason. So how if humanity is a dinosaur thing, how do you recreate which basically is already in destruction mode, which has already been destroyed? Well, another example is Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Well, that was destroyed too. And they're biblical cities too. English words were named after them. Well, one of them is very, very dominant, But, so, how would the earth dry out, basically, after the atmosphere has been basically rained upon the planet, just to wipe out the leftovers? How do you restart that? Well, it's an interesting cycle. It's called the solar tectonic magmonic exospheric cycle, which basically means that the planet got hotter on the inside. The geothermal levels went up because it literally took the sun getting hotter. So here's where that devil factor plays in, because the light bearer has control of the sun for a reason, because that thing is very frickin' hard to control. The sun is a star, but it is also under control. Lucifer controls that star for a reason, because it is at his will and his command. So, heating up the planet, heating up the magma, caused over about 200,000 years, in about 675,000 BC, there was some life returning. But the planet still wasn't really that habitable. What survived the cataclysms of all cataclysms. Well, what was around, you know? The alligator, no. The crocodile, yes. The crocodiles were able to survive. Very few aquatic life survived. Whales survived. Underwater creatures naturally survived. Amphibians survived. Reptiles survived. Certain ones, you know, could survive like that. So it was basically a rebuilding process of what was left over. So the devil's like, what do you want from me? I'm bringing life back to your stupid earth. He's like, what more do you want from me? And, you know, he's like, we wiped out those dinosaurs. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do with this stupid planet? You already know Jesus is going to be the big F up here by his idea of creating humanity. He says, you know that. You know he's the Alpha and the Omega. You know that he knew I was going to lead those angels into the pit and they're going to hate humanity. So he's like, what more do you want from me? And Jesus says, well, it's fun. It's kind of fun. I like this. Keep going. And, well, it just kept on going. So the earth went through a repairing process. Very, very long. Very, 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 very long. And it's very boring to see these things happening. I mean, you know, time, you know, can exist when you can exist out of time. It's a privilege. When you're locked in time and you're just sitting there watching these things, it's not really that fun to just sit there and watch the sky and just watch nothing really happening. I'm watching a screen right now of a sky, and you know, if that screen were to stay that way, that'd be pretty boring. So luckily, you know, they could transcend time here and there, but it pretty much was a long, boring process. So you know, the whole thing is like, why would we continue, you know? Why would the devil, why would Jesus, why would God? To clarify, you know, why they would, it probably goes beyond clarification. It's like, why is water wet? Why is fire hot? Why can the two work together, you know? Fire and water, it can exist on top of water, but fire cannot exist within water. That's the funny thing. So they can work together, but they can't unite. That's basic science. Fire is C34H91 on the elemental chart of physics, and H2O, you know, everybody knows the two cannot unite. They can't. What do you get? You get nothing, you know. It just doesn't work. They can't unite, but they can kind of do things together. So what I'm kind of trying to say here is, like when the Great Flood, the devil dries out the fire, the earth, that God poured down the water. What were they trying to do? Wipe out some test subject that was a joke, just to see if life was even a good idea. A game in a way. So everybody's playing, it's all fun and dandy until you get, you know, humans into the mix. They're not there yet. And so, you know, whose idea was it? You know, it wasn't my idea. I'll tell you that. Don't blame Mystery Man. You know what? I don't know. It's a point the fingers game, you know. But for some strange reason, the players in the game said, let's keep on going. You know, when 2/3 of the angels fell, that part of the Bible is true. But the reason they fell is because they just didn't want to serve. They didn't want to be servants, you know. They just got tired of that, you know. 2/3 was, at that time, when the original fall or whatever, it was just Jesus and the Father and the High Court, and the one, you know, was the High Court was Lucifer. So basically, you know, it was like, well, you know, I don't know, Jesus' idea again, you know, buddy blames him, you know, because he already knew. So how many angels fell originally? 2.8 trillion. And how many were in heaven originally? 1.7 trillion. So technically, the devil had an advantage, a number advantage. But, you know, so they were going down to the earth to do stuff for the earth, you know, to work on the earth. You know, which they do, the rebuilding process. So, by the time that the Garden of Eden was ready, was around, you know, they don't give an exact date in the Bible, but I can give you a pretty clear. The Garden of Eden was many places, and I can't say for sure exactly where it was, but it occurred in 10,000 BC. And in 10,000 BC, there was one garden and two creations that failed the test. That was pretty simple. They were to be as beasts. You know, just they just knew, you know. They just knew to reproduce, eat, and that was about it. No knowledge involved, no risk, no loss. So, whose idea was it to put a tree there? Well, I hate to say it, and I hate to point fingers again, but it was not the father Leonardo da Vinci portrayed in that portrait. He was asleep. He was tired. You know, conveniently, maybe, I don't know. But somebody else was awake, and he was kind of doing everything at that point. So, it was basically Jesus and the devil in that sense. That was their test. The Father was not a part of that test. And, you know, the devil can do a voice, too, that imitates the Father, too. So, that was Jesus and the devil. Simple test of, can we get these primitive, you know, beings to do anything? You know, can they obey a simple order of don't eat from a tree? And, well, no, they couldn't. So, here we go again, you know. Devil's like, well, you know, they were going to fail the test, Jesus. Why do we have to keep doing this? Why do we have to keep this going? You know, what's the point of this? And Jesus says, well, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun, and the devil's like, okay, all right, well, what are we supposed to do? These two, Adam and Eve, Adam and Eve were Caucasians. Yes, these two failed the test. All right, so what do we do with them? Now they have the knowledge of good and evil, and now they're going to be, you gave them the breath of life. What are we supposed to do? Now they're spirits. Now we got these beings that have our knowledge that are a problem. Well, somebody was in the garden laughing because it was a bad idea. And, somebody who's always laughing at stupid things. And, well, Jesus says, we need more people. So, it takes other beings from other galaxies to do that. So what do? They hire some help. And, there's trillions of galaxies. And Jesus said, well, you know what? I got fallen angels all over the heavens. I'll search through heavens 2 and 3. Which is basically the universe. They got it in reverse. Heaven's 1. Why would Heaven 1 is number 1. 2 and 3 is our universe. So Jesus scours the universe for help to create more human beings. So how does he do that? Well, he does it in an odd way. He does something that had to be done for beings to be here to begin with, which is not a big surprise because everybody's like an illegal alien, so it brings in aliens. Aliens, we're pretty good, pretty fast, So Jesus says, well, alright, we got some help. This is good. The demons are like, yeah. What do you want? We're telepathic beings. You didn't even give us vocal cords. What do you want us to do? And he says, well, just splice their DNA. Let's just make it interesting. Let's place these people in all different places of Pangea. It's still Pangea in a way. Considered that. So all these people were placed here by aliens, you might say. Again, Jesus' idea. What an idea, what an odd idea. So aliens, they take off here. Keep an eye on this. You know what? If it gets too out of control, you know what? Don't bother us. Just leave us alone. We don't want any part of this humanity deal. Okay? So he says, okay, that's fine. So now we're at about 5,000 BC. Yeah, this is where it's getting interesting because there's these beings with the knowledge of good and evil that are starting to propagate, and they're starting to get civilized. This is the age of civilization. 5,000 BC is the age where humanity began, you might say. And this is the age where it really got interesting. This is where God really started to like this. Not the Father, he was asleep. He was resting, But Jesus, and the devil's like, okay, all right, so we've got civilization. What are we supposed to do with them? Well, you know what? Let's have a dinosaur deal with them. Let's see what they can do in 7,000 years. And let's just see how civilized they'll end up in 7,000 years. And you know what? He says, you know what's going to happen. You're the Alpha and the Omega. And then Jesus says, well, yeah, I do. And the devil says, well, you know you're going to have to die. You know you're going to have to be incarnated on the earth. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I want this. And he says, yeah. Well, because you already know who's in your Lamb's Book of Life, right? And he says, yeah, I do. But you know what? That can change time to time. Because when we enter the age of decay, which is a secret, the Lamb's Book of Life is open for change. So is the Book of Death, which is the Devil's Book. So, 7,000 years of civilization is the whole interesting era of humanity. This is when things really got interesting. This is when the gods and the goddesses started being a prominent figure. One of the biggest ones that I mentioned already was Father Yoshua, the starving African child in 500 BC. You know, it's not coincidental that a Nigerian Jew did help Jesus lift that heavy cross. Yes, it's true. It actually is true. But there are also some other very powerful beings, gods at work here. One of the other ones was Buddha. Buddha was in the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty goes back to the Chinese age of... Basically, the Chinese had this all figured out from the beginning. It all goes back to the Ming Dynasty. That's where Buddha actually was somebody who lived on the earth too, as Father Yoshua. He was classified a Gordo god. Buddha is a god. He is a peaceful god. And Buddhism is peaceful, at least it was. But there's many conflagrations of history and many, what you might say, misconceptions over, quote, civilization of what Buddha stood for. Buddha stood for peace. Buddha was granted this tremendous power as a god because he was supposed to be peaceful. He was going to have a peaceful following, a peaceful nature. Another person that was a reincarnation god. So Buddha was where Buddhism came from, which is a peaceful religion. And, you know, most people are seeking tranquility. They're seeking peace. They seek Buddhism. And that's why the age of civilization came from the kings of the East. So that's when things got civilized. As for the Egyptians, the Egyptian age was roughly around, let's see, I want to say 7,000 BC. 7,000 BC was before Buddha. That you know, Moses, yes, he led the Israelites, yes, he led them to a promised land that was not promised for a very long time. And the Egyptians, you know, whatever, long, boring story. You want to read the Bible to hear about that. Believe me, it's covered in great detail. I'm going to tell you stuff that's not in the Bible that is in other books. That, you know, whatever. So, 7,428 BC, the Great Pyramids were born, and they were built by Egyptian slave labor, the Jewish people. And The pyramids will be turning 12,933 years old today. So, that's just a bit of fact that some people don't understand. So there's your opposites again. Do you want peace or do you want slave labor? Why would the Ming Dynasty trade something that they already saw fail for, which was the Egyptian slave bondage of the Jewish people, and why would they flip that on their own people? Well, it was leadership in the wrong direction. It was history, history in reverse, you might say. It was poor leadership. It was a bad idea. Did it have its benefits? Yes, it did in a way, but not in the way that it was intended. So, as for learning from mistakes of Nate, well, to be fair, the Chinese, they didn't really know what was going on in Egypt, at the time. They were separated by about 12,100 miles. So, it's hard to say. But as to why they reverted to that slave concept on their own people, I don't know. That's a piece of history though. But there you go again. It goes back to this red versus blue. It goes hot fire on water. It's which one wants to win. So this is the crescendo of creation and destruction in a way. And that is which one can win. Well, actually, water wins under normal circumstances. If you're on planet Venus, water would not win. But that's the thing here. That's the question. That's the X factor. What do we want to win? What do we want to become? Do we want to be Behemoth? Do we want to be destroyed? Do we want to let the game players... believe me, their hands are off the chessboard. Now they're letting humanity move the pieces themselves. So that 7,000 years of civilization was the test, if people could be civilized. It was so-so. But this is the real test, what we're in now. Now is where the real decisions have to be made. So that's about as biblical as it gets. So the bottom line is, do we want Venus or do we want Earth? Or do we want Mars? It's all possible at this point. It's a question, do we want 18? Do we want it? Do we want tomorrow? Do we want to be that? Do we want the 76? Do we want that? So I'm doing tomorrow's episode today because it's like, do we want that? Do we want it? And that is the big question. It's what does humanity want? And this is what you call open-ended. So humanity, you know what? You know the rules of the game, and it's in your hands, and you have to do the best with what you got, and that's it. There's a lot of historical facts there, and there's a lot to work with, and if you're interested in this show, then keep on listening, because I'll just keep giving information, and I'll even tell you some odd things, you know. When I was a child, I was on a bus, and I started saying, I didn't even know what these numbers meant. I started repeating 6, 6, 6, and my mother said, don't say that. And I even drew a character called Tornado Head. One of my drawings, you know, I drew. And, you know, a lot of people that start with an S probably are familiar with what those tornadoes are. You know, do they want to be sucked down them? They don't have to be. You don't have to be, you know. So, you know what? Starhead and Tornado Head were some characters that I created when I was about 6 or 7 years old. You know, I was bored in church and doodling. And I said I had the ultimate evil versus the ultimate good. So, you know what? Starhead threw electrical bolts. Tornado Head had a crown and a jewel. And you know what? That's about it. And the rest is humanity's part. I hope this was an entertaining show. Biblical, historical facts, and a mishmash. And I hope it wasn't too confusing, because I'm going to play it back, and I hope I'm not too confused. Well, this is the preemptive episode 18, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Good night, YouTube.